Let's get right into it. Number 10. In the hills outside Naples, entire neighborhoods run on rules that have nothing to do with the Italian government. This is Camorra territory, and it's been that way for centuries. Not decades, centuries. Unlike the Sicilian mafia, Camorra was never built as one pyramid with a single boss at the top. It's closer to a loose federation, roughly 100 independent clans, each running its own turf, its own rackets, its own quiet wars with neighboring clans. Estimates put its associates somewhere around 10,000 people, embedded so deeply into Naples that ordinary commerce and criminal commerce blur together. Construction contracts, garbage collection, retail leases, real estate. All of it runs through Camorra hands at some level, in some neighborhoods. Compare that to a landlord who owns every building on the block, except this landlord also controls who gets hired, who gets paid on time, and who quietly disappears from disputes. The clans fight each other constantly, sometimes violently, which almost undersells the truly strange part. Naples doesn't need one crime boss, it just needs 100 smaller ones who never fully agree. Number 9. There's a criminal network stretching across former Soviet territory that most people have never heard named directly, even though intelligence agencies have tracked it for decades. Solntsevskaya Bratva, born out of the Solntsevo district of Moscow, grew from a local gang into what analysts have called Russia's largest organized crime syndicate. Not through street muscle alone, through banking. By the late 1990s, the group had pushed deep into financial institutions, using them to launder money and quietly move alongside the country's rising class of oligarchs. Membership estimates run around 5,000, small compared to some rivals, but the reach isn't measured in headcount. It's measured in how far into legitimate finance the organization managed to burrow. Picture a company that owns both the casino and the bank next door, and also happens to write some of the local laws. The line between organized crime and organized capital got blurry fast in post-Soviet Russia, and Solntsevskaya Bratva was one of the groups that made that blur permanent. Number 8. Along the US-Mexico border, one organization has become so decentralized that killing its leadership barely slows it down. The Sinaloa Cartel operates in more than 50 countries, built around trafficking cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl into American markets. Unlike more rigid organizations, Sinaloa never centralized power around one irreplaceable boss. Even after its most famous leader was captured and extradited, the network kept functioning, because no single arrest could take down a structure that was never built around a single point of failure. Analysts have estimated cartel revenue in the billions annually, with a significant share of it flowing directly from the American drug market. It functions less like a gang and more like a franchise, spread across regions, resilient to local disruption. That's the quiet, unsettling part. Most organizations collapse when you remove the person at the top. This one was built to survive exactly that. Number 7. In Kobe, Japan, there's a criminal organization with an actual headquarters, an actual nameplate, and members who have handed out business cards. This is Yamaguchi-gumi, the largest Yakuza group in Japan, and its openness is the strange part. It didn't start as an underworld operation. It started before World War II as a labor union for dockworkers, before evolving into something far larger and far less legal. At its peak, membership numbered in the tens of thousands, drawing revenue from extortion, gambling, construction kickbacks, and drug trafficking. One former national police chief in Japan has said drug trafficking sits at the very top of its income sources, ahead of gambling and extortion combined. Compare that openness to Western crime syndicates, which typically hide behind shell companies and front businesses. Yamaguchi-gumi, for decades, operated with an office address you could mail a letter to. It's the rare criminal empire that never needed to hide, because for a long time, almost nobody was stopping it from operating in plain sight. Number 6. Somewhere in Southeast Asia and beyond, a network without a headquarters, without a single leader, and without a fixed home base has quietly become one of the largest criminal operations on the planet. Triads don't function like a company with a CEO. They function more like a franchise brand loosely licensed across independent cells, some cooperating, some barely aware of each other. This structure makes triads notoriously difficult to dismantle, since there's rarely one central node law enforcement can target to collapse the whole system. Analysts researching global organized crime have repeatedly flagged this decentralization as one of the reasons triad-linked networks have persisted for generations across multiple countries. It's the criminal equivalent of trying to shut down a hydra by punching it once. Every cell that goes down barely dents a structure built specifically to survive losing pieces of itself. The absence of a single boss isn't a weakness here. It's the entire design. Number 5. In the early 20th century, a criminal alliance formed in the United States that deliberately erased old world boundaries most people assumed were permanent. The commission was built to stop Italian-American mafia families from killing each other over territory, forming instead a governing council that settled disputes the way a board settles internal company conflicts. Formed around 1931, it brought together the heads of New York's most powerful families under one shared set of rules. Disputes that once ended in bloodshed increasingly ended in meetings instead, a shift that dramatically reduced open warfare between families for decades. It's a strange thing to imagine organized crime borrowing corporate governance before most legitimate corporations formalized their own. The commission didn't eliminate violence. It just centralized the decision of when violence was worth the cost, which, in its own quiet way, made the entire American underworld far more stable and far more dangerous at the same time. Number 4. There's a mafia in southern Italy that operates less like a criminal gang and more like a shadow government, complete with land ownership and generational inheritance of power. 'Ndrangheta, based in Calabria, has become one of the wealthiest and most powerful organized crime groups in the world, largely by staying quiet while other Italian mafia groups grabbed headlines. Its structure centers heavily on blood relations, with power typically passed down within families rather than earned through rank, making it extraordinarily difficult for law enforcement or informants to infiltrate. Analysts have linked the organization to a significant share of Europe's cocaine trade, moved through legitimate-looking shipping and trade routes across multiple countries. It's the difference between a gang that recruits and one that's simply born into. Compare it to a family business passed down for generations, except the family business happens to be one of Europe's largest cocaine pipelines. While the world watched Sicily, 'Ndrangheta quietly became the one law enforcement now considers the most dangerous of all. Number 3. In New York during the early 20th century, a killing operation existed with something almost unheard of in organized crime. A fixed price list. Murder, Incorporated functioned as the enforcement arm for the American Mafia's National Commission, carrying out contract killings on behalf of multiple crime families. Estimates from investigators and historians place the number of murders linked to the group somewhere between 400 and 1,000 over roughly a decade of activity. It operated with business-like detachment. Hits were assigned, tracked, and paid out with the same procedural calm most companies reserve for filing paperwork. Compare that to a delivery service, except what got delivered was finality, and the tracking number was a body. The organization eventually collapsed after one of its own members turned informant, revealing the machinery from the inside. What makes it unsettling isn't just the killing. It's how administrative the killing became, filed, assigned, and closed out like any other line of business. Number 2. In the 1990s, a Colombian cocaine operation grew so large it functioned less like a criminal group and more like a small, extremely violent nation-state. The Medellin cartel, at its peak under Pablo Escobar, controlled an estimated 80% of the cocaine entering the United States, generating profits historians have placed in the billions annually. It built its own infrastructure, submarines for smuggling, private security forces, and at times, direct influence over local politics through bribery or violence, whichever proved more convenient in the moment. Escobar reportedly offered to pay off Colombia's entire national debt in exchange for amnesty, an offer serious enough that it forced the government into a real conversation. Compare that kind of leverage to a company offering to bail out a country to avoid regulation. The cartel didn't just break laws. For a stretch of time, it had enough capital to negotiate directly with the state that was supposed to be enforcing them. Number 1. There's an organization so old it predates most modern nations, and it didn't just survive into the present, it helped define how organized crime works everywhere else. The Sicilian Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, formed in the 19th century out of local power structures, protecting land and business interests in the absence of a strong central government. What started as informal protection rackets eventually evolved into a hierarchical criminal system that inspired the American Mafia, complete with codes of silence, ritual induction, and rules of loyalty other crime groups would later copy almost exactly. Prosecutors in the 1980s eventually cracked the organization open through the Maxi trial, convicting hundreds of members using testimony from insiders willing to break omerta, the code of silence, for the first time at scale. It's the criminal equivalent of a founding document, copied, adapted, and reused by organizations an ocean away who never set foot in Sicily. Every hierarchy, every code, every business-like structure on this list traces some part of its blueprint back here, to a set of rules written for a small island that ended up shaping organized crime worldwide. That's 10 organizations that turned crime into infrastructure. If you like this, subscribe for more.